All right. Um, Monsignor William, how's it going?
Hey Jim, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good. Great to have you here.
Yeah, I must say I'm a really big fan. I'm Catholic, so we don't agree on everything, but I really enjoy your kind of deep dives into like sometimes like these hyper specific kind of not necessarily abstract, but these questions concerning like certain schools of thought and the sort of genealogy of different philosophies and ideologies and whatnot. um, and so I sort of kind of I've developed this theory which my brother told me this was actually kind of talked about in the like, are you familiar with like the era of like German philosophers where it was like Goethe and Hegel? Like, I don't know what that
A
period's.
little. Well, I know what era you're talking about. All I know really specifically about is Hegel's philosophy, but I know that
Mhm.
milieu you're referencing.
Yeah. So I've really always been fascinated by ethnography and demography, right? I posted the comment earlier that I'm from Louisiana. I'm obviously French, right? That's kind of our like
What?
state
A
identity,
French guy from Louisiana? That's crazy. What are you talking about?
right? And then I'm also Canary Island Spanish, but I won't focus on this other side. But my father is Ashkenazi Jewish, right? Um, and so with the French and the Spanish, like I've like because I speak Spanish, I speak Portuguese and whatnot, even though like, I didn't speak those languages growing up, and I live here in the Northern Virginia area, and a lot of people ask me if I'm like like Latino or Hispanic or whatnot, and then I kind of thought to myself like, well, I mean, I'm not from Mexico, I'm not from Colombia, I don't have any you know close relatives as far as I'm aware of, but I was kind of thinking in the sense that like correct me if I'm wrong. I think this comes from the Bible, or at least this is how people in biblical times understood this, that like ethnicity, right? It comes from the Greek word ethnos, right, which means tribe. And so they didn't think of it as like a race, like these people are black, these people are white, these people are brown, or like whatnot. It was more so like the language you speak, right? The religion you follow,
Yeah,
the clothes you wear, right? And so I thought to myself, like maybe that like ethnicity can sort of not race, right? Like it's not about genetics, but like your ethnicity in a sense can sort of change, right? You can have this sort of ethnomorphasis,
yeah, for
right?
sure. Because we were talking about all throughout this episode is how the Celtic Franks and then the Germanic tribes became kind of merged into the same world, and then they merged with the Latin world. So they would have started calling themselves part of Latin civilization. Like they did change, and so I
Mhm.
do think that people can change definitely. And I think America and even parts of South America are just way too obsessed with this race nonsense. It's like
Yeah.
culture and
Mhm.
language and religion are always going to be more important than this race idea. Like, so I agree
Yeah.
with you there.
Yeah, and I think ever since I've taken my Catholicism seriously, like especially growing up here in America, like I could always kind of tell like, well, like how am I supposed to have more in common with some dude in like Denmark, where we don't even have like the same religion, we don't speak the same language. Okay, we might look the same because we're like white, whatever that means, because that's kind of made up.
Whole milk, whole milk.
Right.
Yeah,
Whereas, as opposed to someone in Italy or Brazil, right, I feel much more in common with them because we share the same faith, right? I know a lot of Orthodox Christians here in the West say the same thing about like people in Serbia or wherever it is.
well,
So
I'll leave you with something interesting. Two things. I don't. I get why people from Latin America are called Latino, but as
mhm.
someone who studies history, it kind of irritates me because people will not say Latino or Latina sometimes. Say, "Oh, I'm Latin." Say, "What? Like you're Latin?"
Mhm.
Like Latin means that you are from this Celtic tribe in Italy or something, or
Yeah, Latium. Yeah.
yeah, so it's like it's kind of confusing. It's like now it means like a new world, half Spaniard, half indigenous. It's like it just kind of how the word changed a lot. But I mean, I get why people say that. But another thing is I was watching Sopranos. I'm rewatching it. Best
Yeah,
show.
I am too, actually.
Nice.
Interestingly enough.
I'm in season 1 right now,
Great.
and I think it's the best show ever made in terms of quality.
Fantastic. Yeah,
And
I love it.
yeah, there's a scene. That is a good coincidence. There's a scene where he's talking to Dr. Melfi, and he goes like, "Oh, I don't like Cusimano. Like he's too white." And she goes, "Well, what
He's
do you
too
mean?
American. Yeah.
Yeah, aren't you white?" He goes, "I don't mean white like Caucasian. I mean white like he's not. He doesn't have a culture outside of his race. Like he's just a guy who's white. That's it.
He's a
Like
bug man,
what's his culture?" Yeah,
Yeah.
so I
Yeah.
thought that was interesting.
Yeah, no, and it's really cool because like how I can, I speak Spanish, and I mean obviously there's might be some outward features like my mustache, like funny enough, like some people they don't think twice about it, right?
I think
And
that's
like
a very. I just want to sorry to interrupt. I think it's a very like new world mustache. You kind of got like that old like Middle Ages like Spaniard mustache. It's nice.
Yeah,
It was
yeah,
good.
no, because
Yeah.
I was gonna say yeah, because of the Canary Island connection. Are you familiar with Alvar Nunez Cabeza de Vaca?
I've heard it before, but I'm not familiar. No.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because he's less recognized when we learn about the conquistadors. Obviously, Cortez, Pizarro, and all them, but Cabeza de Vaca was actually one of the first people to um, explore the Gulf Coast, right? And he was in Louisiana, he was in Mississippi, Texas, Alabama, right? And actually, a large part of the Isleño population in Louisiana is actually ancestrally related to him. Like he's like an icon of the Isleño people. And
That's cool.
I also mentioned that a lot of like the Latin American peasantry that were Spanish, right? They weren't indigenous, they weren't African or any other type of European. If they were Spanish and you were like kind of lower on the totem pole, you were more likely to be of Canary Island descent because a lot of those people were actually commissioned by the King of Spain to go and settle the area, right? And if you were in like certain parts of like the contemporary United States, like there was lots of Spanish speakers there that a lot of people don't even really think about, you know.
Right. Yeah, yeah.
Um,
There's a people forget like a quarter of the geography of the U.S. was part of the Spanish Empire. Like,
mhm.
why are all the cities in California Spanish named? And Colorado, Nevada, the Southwest, Texas, Florida at some point. I mean, so I've even heard. Let me know if you know about this. I'm sure you do. There are different dialects of Spanish in like Colorado and Utah that very few people speak anymore, but they're like these really old dialects of Spanish.
Yeah, I've heard recordings of it. I can understand them basically no problems, but obviously the accent it's very like distinct, kind of like when German speakers in Germany hear like Texas German.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and obviously because I remember you were kind of explaining because you're a diaspora yourself how like they take the culture of what was the people then and there at the time, and obviously they're not under the governance of their former countries because a lot of linguistics is political. Actually, people don't really realize that.
Yeah.
And so when the people that were there in Germany, or sorry, in Texas, like the Germans or like the Spanish speaking peoples in the Southwest United States, they were separated from Spain, and so a lot of inventions and like technological advances happened that like they didn't have a word for it or they didn't know obviously what uh like the new word for airplane for instance
Right.
was going to be. So like it's funny to see like these sort of things of different words that like they had to kind of come up with, and then oh no, but back in here in Germany they came up with this word. it's
Well,
it's
yeah, because
fascinating.
I had when I was in school, I went to an international school, so our
Hmm.
Spanish teacher wasn't just like a Mexican guy or girl that lived in Chicago. They actually came from Spain, and so the Spanish they were teaching us was different from the Spanish you would see in like a Mexican town, Mexican neighborhood here called Pilsen. It's obviously going to be a version of Mexican Spanish, but we were learning continental, modern Spanish from Spain itself. And so it's quite different. And then also, I know that a lot of people, not a lot, but some people in Latin America don't even refer to their language as Spanish, but as like Castilian or Catalan. Is that true?
Yeah, that's actually more found in South America, interestingly enough. Like, and I'm talking about South America, like the southern part, because there's similar to how you were explaining in one of your videos. I remember you're very good at explaining these kind of um, intellectual and things. Thank you for this, because you actually like reflect a lot of what's going on in my mind. I'm like, oh wow, he's literally me, bro. And so you're explaining
Wait,
how like
sorry.
not everyone.
One thing
Oh,
really quick, I just got to respond to this. Yes, it was an IB school. I did my IAs and I did the GCSEs. Haha, thank you very much. All right, go ahead.
yeah, and so how not everyone, so like you see the borders of like a country on a map, like not everyone from that, like from that corner to that corner is homogenous, speaks like literally the same language. Like there's going to be regional differences, right? And so, and it also has to do with geography too, right? Like the southeast of France, like the Riviera, is a lot more like Italy, right? It looks a lot more like Italy.
Right.
They're like Nice and
Well, if we
Marseille,
look at this map I have on the screen, it might be
right?
a little small, but I'm trying to show that the purple, guys, is Celtic. I don't know why
Yeah.
he says Near Eastern there, so let's ignore that part. But the purple, that's what I said earlier in the stream, was Celtic. The kind of turquoise is where there's a mixture of Celtic and Germanic people, and the blue is
Hmm.
Germanic. So there are like these are the basic ideas here. But you're right. Like in Spain, there are a lot of different dialects. People don't just walk around going,
Hmm.
"Hey, I'm Spanish. I speak Spanish, and I'm a Latino." Like it's a lot different over there.
Yeah, and it's not like that there isn't that kind of commonality, right? But in South America, obviously the northern part of it, that's like Colombia, Venezuela, um, they're a lot more like the Caribbean, right? They're a lot more like Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic. Um, they kind of have like, are you familiar with the Paisa culture of Colombia? That's like what Pablo Escobar is. I don't know if you've watched Narcos.
No, I did not, but why don't you tell me a little bit about that while we're on the topic?
Yeah, so they're largely descended from um, not just Isleños, but just Spanish people in general, right? Like they're not as indigenous. They're more like their identity is like they're more European, they're more Spanish, and they have a very specific way of talking. They have this sort of um, like artistic, poetic tradition that's like specific to them. That's really cool. They have a cool way of talking, right?
Yeah,
And so, and Venezuela is obviously similar to Colombia, but then there's like the part of South America, like Peru, Ecuador is kind of a mix between like the Colombo Venezuelan, Peruvian, Bolivian, like the Peru Bolivian culture is like very Incan. A
right.
lot of the population actually, yeah, like, I don't know if it's the majority, but at least like I think I've seen some numbers like 40% of the population can speak Quechua and the other indigenous languages. And it's a big part of their culture, like the Peruvian flute bands in South Park or whatever that, and they wear those like ponchos and all that stuff. Um and then when you go to like the eastern part of South America, Brazil is kind of like its own thing. I don't want to talk about that right now as much as
Well,
I
it's
would,
not.
but I know this is your show.
Yeah,
It's not mine. But then, yeah, like Argentina and then like Paraguay, Uruguay, that's like its own culture too. Like
definitely.
and it's not just in the genetics, because interesting enough, a lot of the European peoples there aren't necessarily Spanish, but like they think of themselves as being more European, and they refer to the language as Castellano, right? Castilian.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, and it's just, I must say, because I've been on more than I should have been. I really appreciate it, James.
Oh, that's fine.
Um,
I'm glad you're helping the stream become longer. A lot of times I have a trouble getting it past like 45 minutes. So I like when people come on and it can be wildly.
mhm.
I don't even think it's that off topic. I mean, we were talking about Western Europe, so this is definitely part of it. But I'm gonna let Octavian on now. Thank you very much, William, and hope you can join in a future stream as well.
Yeah, thank you, Jim.